Hello, I'm John Feldt. Welcome to the Blue Water Outlook Weekly Water Briefing for March 24th, 2013. It's been a very active week across the southeast U.S. There have been several periods of severe weather. First one early in the week brought tornado activity. The second one brought mainly hail, but from a rainfall perspective, look how widespread rainfall was across the region. Yellow indicates 2 inches or more of rain, and look how much of Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia it covers, as well as far northern parts of Florida and parts of South Carolina. Now, the green is about an inch or so of rain, and then blue are lighter amounts of rain, so lighter amounts over North Carolina and Virginia. But rain and snow is on their way there, so they're going to have some beneficial rain as well. I wanted to point out also the sort of look at these streaks here. We beginning to see this, and this is a sure sign of spring. These are individual thunderstorm streaks, and throughout winter, what we would have seen as a more uniform pattern. Now we're beginning to see these streaks in the precipitation trends, and like I said, that's a sign that spring is here, and we're going to see a lot more of that over the next couple months. Now here's the departure from normal. It's a little bit different than percent of normal. This is the amount of rain in inches that has either been above or below normal. So blues and greens are above normals, or gainers of rain. Yellows are below normal. And I wanted to just sort of keep an eye on the areas of green and blue for the last week. The areas of blue are 2 inches of rain or more above normal. And the areas that had been wet, such as Mississippi and Alabama, were prone to some isolated flooding. The soils were fairly wet. Other areas such as southern Georgia, which have been dry, that was a welcome rain and helped continue to break down the long-term drought. Now I thought I'd look back over the last 90 days and give sort of a summary of winter. And what we see here is we see that Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia really did have above normal precipitation, a number of inches above normal. Almost all of Florida and most of the Carolinas have been below normal for the winter. Now let's look at drought, and we can see from early December, this past December, to the current time, that additional rain, that area in blue that I just showed, this is how the year the season started. And with that additional rain, look how it really sort of eliminated drought in this region. It eliminated a lot of drought in this region, and it really brought this area down. Even the recent rain we had, which isn't factored in here yet, but we had extreme or exceptional drought, and now that's brought down to just light amount of drought, if any, and that's going to continue with the rain that occurred over the last week. Now, getting into severe weather season, I just wanted to point out these are some severe storm reports for weekend events where we had quite a bit of hail. I did want to mention quickly on tornado climatology that Georgia's most active month for tornadoes is actually March, and then very close behind with April. But as we get into April, Alabama, Mississippi, this whole region here, Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, can be very active when it comes to tornadoes. Later in the spring, May and June, it works further north and east. But typically, as we get into late March into April, Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama will be the hot spot for severe weather. Now, with severe weather, it's also associated with the potential for flooding. We're very close to the peak of flood season right now, and you might say, why does it occur? Well, there are a number of reasons. Primarily, this is a very wet time of the year, typically. We start to get Gulf of Mexico moisture into the area. Also, due to the entire winter months, the grounds have been getting wetter and wetter, so it enhances runoff into rivers. And third factor is evapotranspiration from shrubs and trees is still minimal. So we have those three factors coming together right at this time, and typically we get a lot of flooding before it drops off very quickly as we get really into the latter part of spring. So these are some points that we have very high flows, which are represented in yellow, or minor flooding in orange. I wanted to point out here that even though you see a lot of areas here that are with these dots, this is really well below normal for this time of year. I've seen it much worse, much more widespread coverage and much higher intensity. This is sort of just a scattering of minor flooding, and considering this is the peak of flood season, this is really well below normal. So even though there is some flooding, almost every year there will be some flooding this time of year, this is saying that we could still use more rain, especially with summer right around the corner. Just a real quick slide showing snow cover. This will be filling in here with a snow event that's occurring this week. But I wanted to point out with this Arctic oscillation I'm going to talk about, you might remember I mentioned we're at a all-time seasonal low for the negative phase of the Arctic oscillation. The snow cover has really picked up. So now we're beginning to expand that snowpack. And perhaps some snow in the higher elevations here in the southeast U.S., but really nothing down our area. But it is sort of interesting to watch the snow cover further to the north. Now, I did mention the Arctic oscillation. Last week in my briefing was going to dip down to a seasonally low record. Look how much that is. That's way down there. And consequently, we've had certainly cold temperatures across a large part of the country. But from a precipitation standpoint, when we get these transitions, these abrupt transitions, we usually get enhancement of precipitation in certain areas, including the southeast U.S. And the forecast here, the ensemble forecast in red, shows that most of this week it's going to stay pretty much negatively phased, extremely negatively phased, and then begin to moderate back up more towards a neutral as we get at the end of month or early into April. Now I wanted to show you here one of the things that I find interesting is when you get this negative phase, and this is temperature, this is the coldest air up here, warm air here, cold air sinks south and eventually east. And what it does is it sets up these really tight differences between cold air and warm air. And this is usually where the action is. Now, over the southeast U.S., it can be in the form of severe weather between the battle between the cold and warm. And in the Midwest, as we're seeing this weekend with a snow event all the way from Colorado up into the northeast U.S., tracks of low pressure move up along that as well. So it does cause an enhancement of precipitation in some areas. Other areas, such as the upper Midwest, pretty quiet. So here's the big picture this week. Early this week, the jet stream's in blue. That's your typical negative phase Arctic oscillation pattern. And then late this week, it begins to moderate and the jet begins to lift just slightly. Now, I don't see much active energy embedded in this jet stream other than early this week. Now, early this week, we're going to have the remnants of the severe weather move up into the Carolinas. Thereafter, it looks pretty quiet. I just don't see a whole lot of action this week compared to what we've seen for the last couple weeks. These are surface low tracks. The blue are early this week in red, so this is an early track, and then nothing thereafter. So it does look like it's going to be pretty quiet with no surface low tracks. 7-day precipitation. The blue over South Carolina into Virginia, that is going to be rain and snow over northern Virginia. Also in the higher elevations, that's going to be early this week. Once that passes through, looks pretty quiet for the rest of the week. No significant rain across most of the southeast U.S. So the takeaway points, a rain event will be exiting the southeast U.S. early this week. Cold temperatures due to that negative Arctic oscillation, then moderating later this week as that jet begins to moderate a bit. It looks overall pretty quiet this week, especially compared to last week. Looking out farther ahead in the models, I do see some action early in April. That's way out there, but I will be keeping an eye on that. Now, I'd love to hear from you if you like things on these briefings or if you just do listen to them routinely. Hey, send me an email. I'd love to hear that. You can reach me at john@bluewateroutlook.com. If there are things you'd like to hear more of or maybe things not as much interest to you, let me know. I'll moderate my briefing to make it suit it more for what you need. Working on my newsletter. I hope to get that out early in April. If not, I'll be updating my briefing again next Sunday. Thank you for listening.